So hello and welcome to another episode of Nothing But Love. My name's Russ Gluyas and I coordinate ACON's ageing program known as the Love Project, or Living Older Visibly and Engaged. The Love Project aims to empower older LGBTQ plus communities, including people living with HIV, to lead healthy, active and more socially connected lives. I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people, who are the traditional owners and custodians and first people of the land on which I'm joining you from today. I would also like to pay my respects to the elders past and present, and would like to extend my respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are present with us tonight. I'd like to start by thanking also the New South Wales Government for supporting this series of webinars. With this funding, we are also collaborating with ACON's Northern River team and office to deliver several in-person events throughout this year. The Love Project marks its 10th anniversary this year, and what better way to celebrate than to chat with fabulous LGBTQ plus community heroes, activists, icons, performers, creatives, authors, and businesses who represent our community so well. So today we have nothing but love for Denise McGrath, our first regional guest, born in Leeton in 1953, commenced work with the CBI at CIB in Campbell Street in Surry Hills in 76, marched in 78, has an extensive career in nursing, and started the first Pride March in Leeton last year, just to name a few things. So welcome, Denise. It's really lovely to see you.
Thanks, Russ. Thank you for inviting me to speak. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there's a lot to get through. And I know that we'll get to the Leeton Pride March towards the end, because it's probably the most current thing that you've been doing. But I guess, yeah, so you're in Leeton, which, can you give us a rough idea where Leeton is?
Yes, it's about 6.5 hours drive from Sydney. It's below Sydney, so it's in the southern west part of New South Wales, and it's about 4.5 from Melbourne and about 3.25 from Canberra. So
Right, and it sort of sits in between. What are the two main towns?
So, well, Wagga Wagga is
Wagga Wagga,
probably
that's,
one that
yeah.
they might know. Yeah, so Wagga Wagga to the south, and then going up Bendigo, but it's not New South Wales. Bendigo is sort of a
Yeah,
big town. So there's not a lot of big towns around us. So
yeah.
we're fairly remote. Yeah.
So
We're
can you start by maybe just sharing a little bit of growing up in Leeton, mum, dad, siblings, family life?
yeah. So we started off in a little place called Binya before Leeton. So it's a tiny little well, it's got a post office and a school, and that's all it really still has at the moment. And we were on a farm there. Dad bred merino sheep and black poll cattle, wheat, oats, and barley. And we had no electricity on that farm, and we had like kerosene lamps and a kerosene fridge and that type of thing growing up. So what happened then was we had 5 years of drought, and Dad said, no, walking off. So they walked off the family farm, came to Leeton. Mum and Dad did labouring jobs here. And then we went back to Binya, to the farm. So that happened a few times with what was happening.
Right.
And in the end, Dad said, this is no good. So he brought this was in 65 or something. He brought
And how old would you have been?
well, I was born 53, so I
Right.
was about 12.
Yeah.
About 12. He bought all the farm equipment from the farm.
Yep.
And ended up exchanging the farm equipment for this old house in Acacia Avenue in Leeton, because the people that owned that house wanted to go share farming. So Dad exchanged the header, the combine, the plough, all the discs and all the farm equipment for this big old house, lovely old house, really old but needed a lot of work, in Acacia Avenue. If we did that today, like a header and a combine and all those things now, if you had your farm plant today, it'd be valued at, a couple of million. But then you'd buy, 2 streets in Leeton.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So then we ended up in Leeton. So we stayed here, finished the schooling here. And I got married. Now, a lot of people don't know that because my maiden name was Trembar.
Yep.
But I fell in love with the most gorgeous guy.
Mm.
And explaining that to the people who are thinking
Yep.
I might be bi is that it's okay. Everybody thinks that, people go, oh, no, you're going to be bi. And I said, no, I'm biromantic. So I have the ability to make really deep romantic relationships. And I get really attracted romantically to men, but only sexually attracted to women.
Yeah.
But in the end,
so
it was
biromantic lesbian. Biromantic lesbian. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. So my ex-husband and I are still really good friends. So lovely man, and his wife is one of my school friends.
Oh, okay.
And,
good. Yeah.
Yeah, because Mum decided that Brian and Kathy, my friend, who were getting on a bit, decided they needed to. She wanted to play Cupid, so she invited them round for Christmas lunch, and then the rest is history. So,
right.
Mum doing her best work. So
amazing. So, at what age were you married?
Oh, quite young, 19.
Right. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
And stayed with him for how long?
Oh, till 70. So I was 23, I think. So I was born in 53. Till 76, 23. Yeah. Right. So that's what's that? 6 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
But he was a good man. It was a good marriage. Lovely, lovely man. He wasn't a drinker really. Never really drank. Came straight home from work. Was very attentive. Was lovely. Wasn't redneck. Wasn't. I could never have married a redneck or anybody that was. He wasn't classical. He wasn't classical like you'd think. Oh well, I would want to be with a classical sort of more feminine man. He was not like that at all. He was quite robust and very dark, wavy hair, almost looked Spanish. With the skin that tanned easily. But absolutely delightful man. Yeah,
and lovely that you stayed friends all these years.
Yes. Yeah. It's great.
I had a girlfriend for 4 years, from about 18 to 22-ish, or 17 to 21. And that's when I came out. And I came out kind of about 20, and there was a whole lot of drama in the relationship, and it sort of all fell apart. But to my very, very to the greatest pleasure that I have is Leanne is still a very, very dear friend. And we've stayed very close over the years, even though it was the dramatic kind of split up and I was coming out. We've stayed really, really close. So that's lovely to hear that. So at around 23, was that when you sort of made the move to Sydney?
Yeah. So like in Leeton at that time, it took me a while to figure out what was going on because Mum and Dad, there were no conversations at the dinner table, So I didn't know. But then when I was married, I realised, Brian and I realised, and we made a decision on what we'd do. And he took me to Sydney, set me up there, and would check on me. Check on me every week to see if I was okay. He wasn't bugging me. He wasn't bugging me to come home. He was giving me that freedom. Really incredible man.
Wow, there wouldn't be many men like that. That would be so generous and accommodating. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, I've said out of all the relationships I've had, that Brian's personality and his genuineness and his sincerity and his softness is better than anyone else that I've ever been with. So the nicest person, when you talk about really nice people, nicest person I've ever been with. So
and what sort of work were you doing around that time when you were married to him?
Yeah, so when I got married to him, I was actually nursing at the hospital.
Right.
But I did my enrolled nurses training because I couldn't do anything else in a little hospital. So, and then I left and went to Sydney.
Right.
So, but I went to the scientific, CIB scientific and technical, they called it at the CIB, went there. And then I was there for
So that was a bit of a
70
shift. That was a bit of a
yeah, yeah,
shift. Yeah.
yeah. 76 to 80, and then I
Yeah.
started my training at Royal Prince Alfred in 1980. Yeah,
Right.
so so that
And
was
any
interesting.
relationships when you first got to Sydney in 76?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. That was really interesting because I ended up with a lady who was actually bisexual.
Mm.
She had a little boy, and that was great. He was lovely. He's a lovely fellow, and that was in the time when we were fearful of having our children taken from us
Mm.
because we were still in the medical of psychiatric medical compendium. It still said we were mentally ill.
Yeah.
It wasn't declassified for many years later.
Yeah.
So we were seen as unfit mothers or parents if it was guys. But no, we never ever had
Mm.
a problem.
Yeah. I was going to say, how did you avoid kind of getting into trouble or having the child taken?
Well, I don't know whether we were really naive at the time, because this is before the
Mm.
78 March.
Mm.
We decided, because Tully was really bright and the public school wasn't helping too much, so we took him to the Balmain Catholic School,
Mm.
and he did really well there. But it was always Sandra and I that went up. There was never a man involved
Yeah.
so, but nothing was ever said.
Yeah.
So we just flew under the radar.
Mm. And you were, when we were talking earlier on, before tonight, you said you had a gay friend in the CIB that you sort of
Yeah,
hung out with a bit.
yeah. So he was there, and we decided that I said, now Tony, you want to come to this march? And he goes, no, if they find out, these bloody coppers find out, we'll lose our job, And I said, yeah, but I really want to go. And he said, yeah, well, so do I. Anyway, so we decided we weren't going because it was too risky.
Mm.
And then luckily we both had house phones, you didn't have
Yep.
mobiles in those days. And he rang me up now and he said, I'm going. Are you going? And I said, yes, I'm going. So Tully, Sandra's mum was living with us at the time. So Tully was at home with her, and Sandra she was a nurse, she was doing night shift at Manly. So Tony and I went with my cousin David, who was living with Sandra and I, Tully at the time. So
Right.
off we went off, and with David's friend Peter. So
How was that? What's your memory of that night?
Well, it went from exhilaration and excitement about being involved in a cause that had the potential to change so much for us, to very rapidly just, exhilaration just turned to fear really rapidly. Luckily, we were further back in the march. We stayed back. And so when we saw what was happening, we ducked down a side street and managed to make our escape that way. And we went to work on Monday because we had the weekend off, and went to work on Monday, and Tony and I were on the same shift, and we're looking at each other thinking, do they know? Do they know? But no one seemed to know. So
yeah, amazing, because so many people were outed on that night for being in the march and lost their careers. And
my cousin David, he was a hairdresser. He'd trained at Nadumski in Melbourne, then he came to Sydney to live with Sandra and I after he finished his training. Hairdressers were pretty well accepted as they were okay. Their jobs were pretty safe because there were a lot of hairdressers who were gay. So he wasn't too concerned about it. But really, Tony and I were probably pretty naive too, because we just went, nah, we're going to do this. And so it was just luck. It wasn't good management. It was sheer luck that we got through that without being detected.
And what are your memories of sort of being in the lesbian sort of community around that time, like sort of 76 to sort of 82-ish? Like,
well, I remember we went to, as I said, Sandra's mum looked after Tull, and Sandra and I went out. We lived down to Darlinghurst. We went to a place called Ruby Reds. I don't know.
I've heard of Ruby Reds.
Yeah. Anyway, so we went in there one night, and then we went into the ladies' room, and there was this woman who was quite muscular, and she had this other woman pushed up against the wall, like had the hands up, and she took a drawer on her cigarette and she butted it out on the palm of this woman.
Oh.
And Sandra and I were both fairly soft in the way we, we're lovers, not fighters, and we just hightailed it out and never went back to the room. What is this place? And another.
There must have been softer lesbian places, were there?
Yeah. Well, so we joined a club called the Clover Club.
Yep.
And we'd have we had these stickers, and they were little green clovers, and you put them on your back windscreen.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd see these cars with clovers, and that's what our clover. Yeah. You'd be waving away, and that was how we.
Gorgeous.
We had dances up in sort of North Ryde, sort of that area up there, Drummoyne. We had women's dances there, so lots of little picnics and things like that. Yeah.
And did you ever hear the Stray Dags? The band, the Stray Dags? Was there a band called the Stray Dags or something?
No, I haven't heard of them. Probably because we weren't that social, because we had a child. Yeah. So we weren't out on the scene because we were a couple. So, but I used to go down to Wayside Chapel and do a bit of phone counselling.
Yeah.
And then when I shifted to Perth in 80 New Year's Day 84, Marty and Marty, Sue and Marty, they were a couple. They started camp in Pier Street in North Perth. And so I went to camp there and did phone counselling and was part of the Perth group of camp. Yeah.
So that would have been quite an experience, to sort of talking to queer people of all ages, I suppose, on those phone services.
Yeah, well, Wayside Chapel was a mixed bunch. Like we didn't just have gay people, straight people that were suicidal or really needed help. So they had a quite an eclectic mix of callers. But in camp in Pier Street, they were a lot of them were married people that were really struggling. And, so they didn't tend to come out to camp, because we'd say, look, you're quite welcome to come to camp. We have women's sessions, because it was a women's group. It could have been both, but it was started as a women's group. We didn't have guys. I'm not too sure why Marty and Sue only made it a women's group, but anyhow, they did. They were the founders of that group in Perth. But we'd invite them we'd have little movie nights in there with a projector. We'd have little dances, because it was a fairly big old house. We'd, a cup of tea and a chat and have chats. But we'd invite these people to come, but a lot of the married people didn't come. The ones that came along were more your singles that were just coming out.
Yeah. God, you must have been a real lifeline to a lot of people with that service, even just to have a chat about kind of the complexities of their lives and not being able to come out and what was going on.
Yeah, so we got quite a few young people through the doors, and then you'd see them later. Because once they established who they were, they felt confident. They like left the nest, which is what they weren't staying with us for the political or the activist cause anymore. Not that we were wanting them to do that. People can do whatever they want with their visits to camp, but so you'd see them later on. Out on the scene or blah, and you'd go, oh, that little bird's fully feathered now.
Take it off. I know, that's gorgeous. I love that idea of they've got their stability and their feeding, and now they're flying. Yeah. That's gorgeous.
And, hope that they're passing it on.
So it's such an important time for us around there to support each other.
Yes. Well, in Perth, when I went to Perth, Connections nightclub had been established for ages.
Right.
And I don't know that Sydney, and I went, when I went to Perth in 82 for a holiday, I fell in love with it, and I finished my training in 83 at Sydney, and then I decided to go to we decided we were going to go and live there. So, Connie's was well established, and and we weren't being raided or anything, like it was different to the Sydney scene. It was absolutely different.
And what was the draw to Perth? What was the What was?
Well, because I lived in the bush, no
Yeah,
power, like
yeah, yeah.
when I first went to Sydney, I remember walking down, I think it was Pitt Street. Well, it might have been, I don't know which street it was, but anyhow, and I couldn't see enough sky, and I had a little bit of it. I'm looking up and going, oh, all I could see was buildings
Yeah.
and not too much sky. And I thought, oh, and I could have potentially had my first panic attack then, but I didn't because I just got on with what I had to do. But it would have been very easy to have a panic attack because it wasn't up sky. So when I went for a holiday in 82 to Perth, remember the America's Cup was on. We had the wing
Yeah,
keel,
that's right.
Bondi.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Perth was very cosmopolitan because it was going to host the America's Cup. It was just beautified and cosmopolitan and fantastic. But it was like a big country town, even though it was a city. So because I'd been reared in a regional area and then spent, time in Sydney and went to Perth, I went, oh, this has got the best of both worlds for me. It's got a city, it's cosmopolitan, but it's got a country pace. And that's why I end up landing there. Yeah, just worked for me.
So you were moving with your nursing career there, like you did.
Yeah. So what? So I went to in order when you shift interstate in those days, in order to transfer your long service, you had to go to a federal funded hospital, not a state funded.
Right.
So I ended up at Hollywood Repat, which was a war vet hospital.
Right.
Yeah. So it was government, but federal government.
And was that interesting work? Was that?
Oh, yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
And it was just short of the time when you had the old-fashioned matrons and the poor bloody soldiers, they were still of the mindset that when a senior staff member walked in the door, they had to drag themselves out of bed and stand there half dead and do the stuff, So that was just stopping, but so many of the people still felt they had to do that, So, we're still in that era. And it was like an old, like barracks, like an old Navy hospital. And then I went from there to Sir Charles Garden Hospital once I qualified to transfer my funds after 12 months.
And where did the palliative care component of nursing come in? Was that something that you majored in when you studied, or you sort of moved into it, or?
So what happened was I was an intensivist nurse for all of my all the early, sort of for 3/4 of my nursing career, and loved it. Just loved the excitement, the adrenaline, and whatever. But as I got older, I started to, well, you slow down. Your body doesn't deal with all that. Those adrenaline surges and all the cortisol and all, the things that are really bad for your body. So I had a look at what I might like to do. And palliation, community palliation was the way to go. Yeah. And although I loved intensivist nursing and thought that I would only ever be an intensivist nurse until the day I left nursing, I would have to say that I actually got more out of creating a good death for people, and their loved ones around. Well,
it's very intense work, but must be incredibly gratifying or something.
It's different. Like you're not running down hospital wards, opening people's chests up in the middle of the night because they've had their grafts done, they've open heart surgery and they've blown a graft off their chest. And so you've got the sternotomy trolley, you wire cut the sternum, you clip the bleeder, and how you hope that the team's in and getting ready to take it back to theatre. All that stuff was real adrenaline. It was an adrenaline fix.
And palliative care would have been slowing it all down.
So you were going to people's homes and people were choosing to die at home. I'd go right out to the wheat belt. We serviced quite a big area. It was Silver Chain, which was the organisation, which was a not-for-profit organisation. It wasn't government. Massive organisation, absolutely massive. A great hospice team. They had PRA, which is Priority Response Assessment, which is like a casualty on wheels. So you had like your nurse practitioners and that going in there, and they could prescribe, say someone was really, and you could self-refer to that. Like, you could self-refer. and they would go out and do the assessment. But if it's something that required hospital, well, then they would just get them off if they needed to in an ambulance. But other than that, they could treat them at home, put the drips up, do all the stuff, which, it was great because you didn't have the hospital beds clogged up and people could be comfortable at home. And they were your non-palliative people. And then you had the clinical side, which is where people, when they came out of hospital and required dressings, or say they'd had an operation that left them with a tube, a drainage tube, they'd get a referral from the surgeon, and this clinical team would take over, make sure the wounds were okay, remove those tubes when the doctor had advised. So, but ours was the hospice team.
Yeah.
And I still said we needed to get danger money for that because it had silver chain hospice on the side of the cars.
Right.
And we had contraband in the boots. So our boots, we had our kit and caboodle with all the contraband that was required to put in the pump. And I always pulled my, like this thing out of the back of the boot, took it into every home, whether I needed it or not. But often go out and my windows smashed, they've tried to get. Another night I was in a house, I'd walked in, I'd put the contraband bag on this kitchen bench, and it was a house that had a hallway that went from one end of the house, one of those old-fashioned houses. And I reckon it had to be someone that knew the family, that there was going to be a visit there.
Right.
It was just like this street that I saw go past me like a shadow. This person came from the back of the house, grabbed my bag and just flew out front. It was so fast because I was actually talking with the client. And I just saw this thing happen, and I thought, oh, you little bugger, So it was an incident form. And
how do you think, do you see much change in palliative care and the way it's delivered nowadays to how you used to?
Well, I don't know, because in Leeton there's really the people doing palliative care here are the community nurses that don't have a palliative care background.
Right.
And unless you've got a really good GP here that is prescribing the appropriate medication for whatever the condition is or whatever symptom that has to be allayed, if you don't have a good doctor here, and I think we've only got one that is really good with medication, but he's got no bedside manner. Right. But I guess if you've got pain, you're not going to be worried about bedside manner. You just need your pain.
Yeah. I don't know about that. I think I want a nice bedside manner too.
That too. And then you've got people, that are got great bedside manners, got no idea about palliation medication, Yeah. But I've said to the nurses here, the community nurses, because I came home to look after Dad from Perth to Leeton, came back, and I said to them, that you can go to Perth, Silver Chain you can second yourself there if you wish, and they will train you. And a lot of doctors from all over Australia came to Perth, and they would ride with us in our cars because we each had a car, and they'd come out and do the visits with us nurses, and we'd train them. So and then
so you came back to Perth to what year did you come back to Perth? Back to Leeton?
So I came back to Leeton. So I was in Perth from 1984 till 2013, where I came back to Leeton because Dad was diagnosed with we had prostate cancer first, but the radiotherapy that he had to the prostate caused the bladder. Bladder cancer, because we know radiotherapy can cure cancer, but it can cause cancer.
Right.
So that was what happened as a result. So he had his bladder removed, had a bag, an ileal conduit to wee into. He was very unwell.
That would have been a big choice, would it, to leave Perth, or?
Well, I came home for his major surgery, and I was ready to go back. Like, I was there with him for about 6 weeks. I'd set up an ACON assessment and had backup to come in to take care of him and Mum, because Mum had some severe mental health problems, and there just wasn't enough naughty corners for Mum. Like, she was so naughty, and poor old Dad was just like, oh gosh. I mean, he loved her dearly, but you could see him put himself in this little bubble, like to drum out the noise that she was. She was like a little temper tantrum kid. So I came home for his surgery and stayed 6 weeks, and then the day before I flew back home to Perth, I was going back to Perth to live, back there to my job. And he said, I'm going to have to lay down in the bed. And I said, well, I'll lay down with you. Because I need a nap just as well. And then this old farmer who just didn't ever say anything emotional, put his arm around my shoulder. He looked me dead in the eyes and says, I love you so much. Thank you so much for coming home and taking care of me. And he said, I really appreciate it. And I said, that's okay, Dad. That's okay. But because I'd never had anything like that, none of us did from Dad. I had this reaction. It was quite visceral. It was like a big chrysanthemum going, in the sky shows. And before that sensation ended, I knew I was coming home to Leeton to take care of Dad. And I said to Dad, I'm coming home. And he said, no, you can't do that. This is my dad, who was very mindful, but Mum wanted everything, but Dad was very mindful. And he said, no, you can't do that. You've got 30 years in Perth, and your family is there, because they know your family's there. He said it won't be healthy psychologically for you to come home. He said, and I said, Dad, I'm flexible. That I just get on with what has to. You just get on with it, And he said, oh, you're sure? And I said, yeah. I said, I'm coming home. So it took me about 3 months to sell everything up, get everything organised. I didn't want to leave any real estate there. I didn't want to have that connection that was going to create that pull in that
pull.
And my friends were really concerned about my health. They reckoned that I was never going to manage after, But I brought my dog back with me, little Bill. He was a boxer staffy, and Dad and Mum were on a 1 acre irrigated hobby farm. But they were both too unwell to get in and clean out irrigation ditches or the pipes that feed the paddocks and the old clay ditches. Once you stepped in them, you could hardly get your feet out because the clay sucked you in.
Wow.
And my dog Bill and I, we're in this bloody channel, and there could have been snakes coming at us, we wouldn't know. And I've got this shovel down this big pipe trying to get all this clay out. And he thought it was good fun. And I remember saying to him, people would have thought I was crazy if they'd said, hey, Bill, that was his name. I said, hey, Bill, this isn't bad, is it? He gave me a look, because
they know. If you're happy, they're happy.
Yeah. He just wagged his tail, like as if,
So the adjustment back into Leeton was pretty good overall.
Yeah. So what would happen was, like, a carer's burnout is really, really high.
Yeah.
And when you have, a frail, dying parent and one with psychiatric problems,
that's a lot.
It's double whammy. So when I went back to Perth to sell everything up, Diane, my twin, was sort of living at Stanbridge. She would be in and out to Mum and Dad's house. In the end, she took Mum to her house and left Dad here. He was well enough to leave, and we had a backup service that we had visiting and helping with the shower, whatever, till I got back. Mum just didn't give them any rest at all. Like, she would just, I said, put a lock on your bedroom door, to her and husband. And they said, no, she'd break the door down. She would knock on the door at 3 a.m. in the morning and hit Ian on the forehead really hard with a finger and say, get up and do mashed potato for me. And he'd say,
those complex mental health stuff.
Oh my God. And if she didn't get what she wanted, she'd throw undo a yogurt container and just throw it.
Well, it makes sense that your poor dad wouldn't have been able to sort of find kind of peace in all of that kind of craziness. So he
had this little bubble. I could see him. I'd go, good, Dad, you're in your bubble, because I could protect him. I could protect him, but he had this mechanism. It had developed it over decades with Mum. So
and how long did he survive after you got back?
I came home in 13 and he died in 18.
Right. Oh, so you had some quality years with him.
Yeah. And I'd left in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And I knew my dad was a really nice man.
Yeah.
But I had no idea just how nice he was and patient and considerate. They were polar opposites, Mum and Dad. They were just
wow. Yeah. But it is lovely to have that, like, to be able to have that really valuable time towards the end, just to be with him.
yeah, yeah.
And
He,
yet, and get to know him even more.
oh, yeah. He, like, it wasn't really sexist because he didn't know any different
Yeah.
because, like, we don't gender jobs, right? But it's, we'd have some visitors come and he was telling them that I was his other son because I could do anything that Neville could do, my other brother.
Yeah.
You know, because I could
Yeah.
do a lot of stuff, manual stuff as well
Yeah.
as intellectual stuff. And I thought that was so funny.
Yeah,
He
it's just
didn't
that
say,
sort of that generalized stereotyping of what people
yeah,
do, and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that
And
generation.
we'd sit out in the we'd have a bit of a laugh because Dad's used to breeding animals, you know, you sheep and that you watch how the bulls and, you know, the rams are performing. You do these, you have to do that for your farmer. But we had some goats here and we had chooks and roosters. And I'd say it'd be a nice sunny day, and I'd say, Dad, do you want to sit out in the sun and watch some paddock corn with me? You know? He said, oh yeah, we'll have a cup of tea, go out and watch some paddock corn.
It's so country. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And we had this rooster, and he just didn't know how to do it. And the chooks were sort of getting really frustrated with him. And he'd hop on, and the chook would go, nah, and kick him off.
Yeah.
And this black chook, she yelled at him. She was about, 10 feet away, and she screamed at him. It must have been, you get here and do this stuff because you're just being a bloody wimp. And next minute he runs over to her, he hops on and he does the stuff. And I said to Dad, well, get out.
Hours of endless entertainment.
Yeah, he's just been told by the matriarch. Yeah, so
and did Mum survive your father, or?
Yes, she died. So she ended up going to the nursing home because it nearly killed Diane and Ian. Like they weren't getting sleep. I said, look, you don't need anyone's permission to put Mum in the nursing home. It's just what it is, and you guys are going to get very unwell if you don't do that. And then so they did. And then when I came home, I said to Mum, do you want to come home for a trial? Because Dad wanted her home, even though she was a handful. He really missed her.
Yeah.
And so I brought her home and I said, well, look, we'll do a trial for 5 weeks. And she was so badly behaved. It wasn't funny.
Oh.
And when she'd been watching the calendar, and I just was wondering why she was watching the calendar. She go have a look at it, you know. And then the day of the 5th week came up and she said, well, thank God. And I said, what is it, Mum? She said, the 5 weeks are getting me back to the fucking nursing home. And I thought to myself, if I'd known she hated
I
this
know,
that
all that spent energy.
Spoken to me. Yeah, anyhow.
Well, look, I'm just conscious of our time, but I'm sure people won't mind if we go over a little bit. But I am keen to sort of get to kind of Leeton Pride March and how that all came about.
Yes. So what happened was when Dad died, and Mum was in the nursing home, of course. So Dad died in 18. I thought, well, Mum's in the nursing home. I can either go back to Perth or I can stay here. And my twin was here, and she's a great ally. And so I decided to stay in Leeton. And I thought, well, what I need to invest myself in the community or I'm not going to do very well. You know, you've got to be invested. You've got to get out there and do stuff. You can't sit at home and watch the paddock corn, you know.
Yeah, more than that,
yeah. And so I decided I had a few, you know, check a few things out, and I decided, Leeton did need a Perth group, a Pride group. And so in 1919, I incorporated Leeton Rainbow Pride Collective. We had lots of things happening, but we didn't do our first Mardi Gras last year because we had COVID. And because I was also on the Sunrise Committee, which has the big biannual harvest rice festival event, and because we'd lost money preparing for these events and then having to shut them down, we'd lost like 40 or 50 grand. And I said to our group, we can't risk that because we're the poor relatives. We don't have that to lose. So we waited till we were really safe. And in 23 last year, we had our first Mardi Gras 3-day festival.
So you learned a lot from just doing that sort of groundwork leading into the Pride March with the other group.
Well, what was really interesting is that Leeton now is a really inclusive town,
Yeah.
right? We've got, like on the signs going into town, you've got this big board saying all migrants are welcome, and we've got a large refugee group here. And I remember when I went to start the group, I had incorporated it, but Tyson Arapali, who was with ACON, the regional
Lovely Tyson.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I said, Tyson, I knew that he was going to be in Wagga doing something. And I said, do you reckon if I tee up a council meeting here and get, 10 minutes to talk at the meeting, would you come with me and we could have a chat to the councillors about what I hope to bring to Leeton and that type of thing? He said, yeah, sure. And I walked in and I said to Tyson, I don't know what's going to happen, Well, the councillors were fantastic. The mayor, the councillor, the CEO of the council, they were just all embracing. They were fine. Yeah.
That's wonderful. It could have gone either way, couldn't it? They could have been really challenged and
yeah. Well, when I finished chatting, they all got up from their chair before they went on with the meeting again, like the proper part of the meeting. And they all came and shook our hands and had a little chat, and then went back to their council meeting, their monthly council meting.
I'd imagine that they would have listened to you and thought, if anyone's going to get this done, Denise is going to get it done.
Yeah, well, they didn't really know me because, see, I didn't have much of a social life because I was a carer.
Yeah.
So, I wasn't really well known. In fact, Diane would introduce me as her sister, her twin, and they'd go, well, we didn't know you had a sister, let alone a twin, because I'd been away for so long, nearly 40 years. So I wasn't really well known,
Well, fantastic that Tyson was there in that moment to be there with you and
we love Tyson. We've got lots of
lovely fellow.
Lots of great events with him here. Like he never got to see.
He said to say hello. I emailed him the other day and said I was chatting with him, and he sends his love.
Oh yeah, I hope he's doing well with his course, and he would be finished now. Actually, I think
almost finished, and he's very intense with his running at the moment. He's going in the city to surf, so he's been training for that. Yeah.
Oh, good on him. Good on him. Yeah, absolutely delightful man.
So then the march finally happened last year for the first time.
Yeah. So it was a 3-day. Excuse me. It was a 3-day festival. So we had a launch party on the Friday. We had 78ers that we brought to Leeton, and we paid their accommodation, and we paid everything for them, their petrol, because a lot of them travel to keep the history alive, but they're not being compensated for any of their travel, and a lot of them are older, they're on pensions and that type of thing. So we had guests. We had the launch party. Then on the Saturday, that's Friday, on the Saturday we had festival in the park, the Pride Festival. Then we had the march, and then we had the after party in the evening. And on the Sunday we had Pride in the museum. We've got a little mini Roxy at the moment because our big Roxy theatre's gutted and they're renovating it. It's a historic building, so it's taken some time. So there's this little mini Roxy theatre. It's a little replica. So we had because I put an exhibition in the museum Chelmsford room. It was called Riot. And we had set up like a 70s bed sit, Sydney 70s bed sit.
Yep.
And we had all furniture and different things. And we had all these banners, like the banners that they painted in those days, sheets and that with all the slogans on there. We had 2 mannequins. One was showing the other mannequin what they'd created, like to take out to that night to the march.
Yep.
So it was sort of that screen that was set.
Yeah.
So we did that. And we also had Riot the movie in that little cinema.
So it was a lot of work to put all that together.
Yeah. And also that old, so we're a Art Deco town. We've got beautiful architecture. So that old the museum was the old WCNIC building, because it has the water story, because we were the first of irrigations that were set up in 1911. So the Murrumbidgee irrigation area, that's where we are. We're in the middle of that.
Yeah.
So it's got the water story there as well. But so we showed Riot at the in that little mini replica. But that beautiful building every Pride Month,
Mm.
Leeton Council illuminate that in Pride colours. So
Wonderful.
Tim Coulter, he's the lighting fellow for the Roxy and all the things.
Mm.
So he puts all the colours out with these big, massive lights and totally illuminates this building. It's magnificent.
Wonderful.
So that
Do
happened
you
over that
feel like that's
weekend.
sort of making it easier for younger people to come out, or they to maybe be sort of more comfortable with who they are living in the country?
I think like we have a lot of transgender
Yeah.
people. So anyone under 18 has to come to meet with us with a guardian or parent.
Mm.
We never give advice. We're not there to give advice. We're just to support people. If they wanted to know somewhere to be referred to, then I would give them a card with information on it.
Yeah.
But I said to our group, it's important that we don't get involved in suggesting stuff. We can say, look, this is available, but I'd like you to do your own due diligence, that type of thing. But we've got the transgender kids. So that was in 19 when we started. So the youngest one we had was 7.
Right.
And at the time we had about 5 or 6, and the oldest one was 16 at the time.
Yep.
So we've got a lot more now. So we've got a lot of trans people. And we've got, there's a lot of young people, but they're not getting involved. They seem to be pretty well, they're rolling along okay. So it seems to be the trans group that needed more of to know that there was
Support.
someone out there. Yeah.
There's a lot of online stuff, and I think kids are so online nowadays that they kind of research and can find a lot of support that way.
Well, see, no one knew about ACON because we're in the country. No one knows. And unless you've probably lived in Sydney, well, you may not know either, or had some experience with AIDS, some experience. Whether, people are not going to know what ACON is. So, of course, we refer them to your website, and then they go on there.
And there's a whole stack of stuff that they can kind of discover through the website. And how did it feel to march?
Oh, it was exhilarating. It was really funny because I don't know. I keep saying I must have been naive, because none of the things that were happening to other people were happening to Sandra and Tully and I. But that was because I think we never went out there and said, we're gay, we're gay. We never did that. We just moved through life as a very quiet couple of friends who lived together, and she had a child. I was never really butch looking, and Sandra was very feminine. So we could have been 2 sisters walking up the street with one, and one was at home. So we flew under the radar. So I was, even when I was nursing, although I think it was pretty well accepted in nursing, like there were a lot of gay, in my intake, there were heaps of gay people in the 160 intake that was my intake.
So was it a real moment marching? Was it a real was it a full circle moment, or?
Because what had happened was Tony was pretty protected too, because he was young, but he wasn't going out much on the scene. I think he was doing the beats a bit, but not really getting out. So we weren't, and it wasn't until that night and that day, in the day, because we did a 10 a.m. march. Then we did the evening one. It was when we were talking to people there that we got to know about what was happening. We really didn't know. We didn't know the horrible stuff that was happening. There was no social media. There was nothing, And
you were sort of just swept up in the moment and part of it, but not necessarily aware of how big it would be.
We just, So, we didn't, like when the crowd, we're looking at a couple of thousand people when they all ended up congregating. Coney and David and Peter and I, we're going, wow. Well, I know that we thought there'd be a lot of people from the morning event, but we never envisaged there'd be that many people there.
So obviously quite a freeing moment to do your march and not have the protest and not have the pushback and not have the violence, just have the joy
Well,
of it all.
do you know, there was a big, when we have our festivals like Sunrise Festival and that, people line the streets, of course. We had people everywhere look
Mm,
to look at our parade,
yeah,
and they're just waving at us, like these people on the side in the
mm,
streets or the footpaths are just waving and yeah. So Leeton is a really amazing town.
extraordinary. Yeah, yeah. Look, I must say, the first time I marched was quite overwhelming. Like, and you can imagine, like in Sydney, there's like thousands of people all standing there cheering. It was
Yeah,
quite a moment. So
yeah,
good on you.
yeah,
It's amazing that so many little or smaller regional places have now got their own pride marches.
yeah. Well, even Hay
Yeah,
does the Mr. Gay Pride.
yeah,
What do you call it? The judging.
yep,
Yeah, they do that. They've
right,
done that
yeah.
for a couple of
Well,
years. So
that's Hay, I think, is Nick Parkhill, who's the CEO of ACON. I think that's his hometown.
oh, did he come from Hay? I
I'm
didn't
pretty sure he
realise it.
did. Yeah, because I think
Oh, wow.
he
Yeah,
kind of expressed that sort of moment. Like I remember when I went to the first Newcastle Pride,
yeah,
and how kind of weird it all seemed and astounding it was, but also wonderful
yeah. Well,
all
see,
these years later.
Newcastle's really taken off, hasn't
Oh, it
it?
has. Yeah, it
And they got
has.
that amazing pub, like it's on a corner. I forget what it's called. It's like got this corner location. It's like,
Yeah. The
uh,
I've just forgotten it. Got it.
yeah,
Not the Criterion.
can't remember what it is.
Oh, yeah, it's just gone out of my head.
But I've been following
Yeah,
them, so I see a lot of
yeah,
the stuff they're doing. It's really grown. It's just
yeah,
taken off.
yeah,
And yet it was I think was it a coal mining town or
yeah. It
something?
was very much.
And that would
Yeah,
have been pretty redneck back in its day, and I'm
yeah,
thinking,
yeah.
oh my gosh.
It's funny, like coming out. All you want to do is just sort of come out and enjoy it. But there was kind of that little bit of gardenness that you have to have.
Yeah,
Kind of.
yeah, yeah. Well,
But
you have
look,
to be
we're
sensible in this space. Yeah,
I hate
yeah,
to pull it up, but
yeah,
we've
you're
got a bit
fine.
over
Thank you.
time. So I'm sure that everyone's really enjoyed the conversation. We have nothing but love for you, Denise.
Oh,
It's
thank
an
you.
extraordinary life, lots of wonderful things you've done, and to finally kind of
Thank you.
bring a Pride March to Leeton, I think is really, really beautiful. So we really appreciate your time tonight. Um, uh,
Thank you for inviting me, and thanks
yeah.
to everybody that's joined. I hope that you've enjoyed.
Well, the great thing is that
What?
we've recorded it, so it will go up on the ACON YouTube
Yeah,
channel,
yeah.
and I'll post that when I send out an evaluation later on tomorrow.
Okay.
And just before we go, just a reminder about the Love Social Connection event coming up on the 7th of August at the Beresford Hotel. There's still
Okay.
tables available. So take a look out for that as well. But thanks
All right.
again, Denise. Really, really appreciate and love you, and enjoy the rest of the night.
Thanks, Russ. Thank you, and thanks everybody for joining. Yep. Love
Thanks
to
very much.
all. See
Ciao.
ya. Bye. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.